Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio, for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Cheryl, W5MOO, Russ, K5TUX, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome. You have tuned into episode number 546 of Linux in the Ham Shack, the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. It has been a couple of weeks since we have put an episode down, but we are going to do it tonight. We are back with a deep dive episode, so we hope you're all settled in, got your cocktails or whatever it is that you have handy, or maybe a nice IPA, as Bill probably has. And we're going to talk about a topic for a little while. Then we've got a bunch of feedback piled up over the last couple of weeks, and we'll talk about, I don't know, maybe some other stuff. Who knows? But before we get to that, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. For the On Assignment Cheryl, W5MOO, I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
Yeah, we don't get to hear Cheryl's new microphone, at least not this time. She should be back next time. Hopefully it'll actually work. I tested it under Linux this time, and it seemed to work fine. So
that's good. On that mic, you want to set the default profiles and stuff like that with the Universal Control app, and it saves it to the mic, and then you can move it everywhere else. So if you want to tweak it any, do it on Windows or Mac, that actually has the stupid driver and the software to run it.
I did that. I set it to the default profile under Windows, and then I moved it to Linux, and it seemed to work just fine. I think we might have to twiddle the knobs with the gain control a little bit, but it should be good to go.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I like it. It's got a decent compressor and everything else in there, so it takes care of a lot of the other nonsense that you'd have to try to jigger with on the system.
And very good. And what are we talking about here? What's the name of that stupid thing?
The Revelator from PreSonus.
Right, PreSonus Revelator. That's it.
The dynamic version. I have the other one, the one that says what do you call it?
Yeah,
condenser. I have the condenser.
Yep.
Yeah. So I recommended that because Russ was looking for a new microphone for the shop, and I'm like, just use Cheryl's the Mini Yeti and get her a nice little dynamic microphone so we can help her clean up a little bit of the room noise. And then you found out she was running her mic in omnidirectional in the room. Yes. So that explains all the room noise we always get from Cheryl. It did a pretty good job, but yeah, we definitely kind of sabotaged herself, I think, with that.
Yeah, we might do a little better with the combination of the fact that it's a dynamic microphone set in cardioid pattern mode. So we'll see how it goes. And but that's for next time. This time we're going to talk about the new release of Fedora, which is Fedora 40. And Bill's been using it for a couple of weeks now, almost 3, I think. And I tried it out again today on some bare metal. And I didn't get too far with it, but I know you've gotten further because you don't have the particular problem I have. So why don't you go ahead and introduce Fedora 40 and give us a little bit of insight into your install and how it went for you.
Oh, yeah. So I went with, let's see here. I'm just going to bring up my own personal notes on Fedora 40, so I'm not lying on everything. We're making it up. So, yeah, I decided I looked at all of the different Fedora 40 flavors or spins, as they like to call them. The default spin comes with GNOME installed, and having just sort of walked away from Manjaro GNOME, I was like, well, it's kind of tired of GNOME. I want to try something different. I tested that GNOME just to see. I was like, okay, yeah, it works as expected. Then I spun up a version of Fedora 40 KDE, which looked KDE-ish and everything else. So I was like, I've done KDE. I have KDE on my Garuda box over here. Kind of used to that. And then, we had done the Immutable Desktop episode on the Fedora Onyx, and that is based on Budgie. So I went with Fedora 40 Budgie because I'm an old school GTK3, GTK2 guy, right? So I figured I would go old school and have my fast, snappy windows without having to worry too much about the extra, composition and compiz and all this other stuff, kind of slowing the UI down. And the installer is the same regardless of which version you try. I will say that all of them just looked exactly the same when the installer ran. The installer was pretty straightforward. They haven't changed the Fedora installer for at least since like 35, I guess. So if you've been looking at Fedora or trying it out and everything else, the installer has not changed one bit, which I appreciate because you can just click right through it. It's pretty intuitive. If you have to do some disk work, they have the ability to remove partitions and stuff like that pretty quickly and easily without going into gparted and stuff like that and having to do that whole, let me apt-get install gparted and fix all my partitions the way I want or delete them, and so I can make the installer happy. I did allow it to do an automated install on the system. Just for context, this is the same system that I've had for a while now. This is an HP desktop. It's a 15L Victus with a AMD Ryzen 5700G processor in it with 16 threads. And the video card is the ATI AMD Radeon RX 660 XT. So it's, it's not too bad of a system. It's got 32 gigs of RAM. It also has a 2 terabyte NVMe in it. So plenty of storage. In fact, when I backed everything up to my other computer when I was moving from Manjaro, I forgot and backed up all of my Steam directories and everything else. So my backup was huge because I had a few too many games actually installed on that machine. I have since then deleted that. So when I brought the backup back over to the computer, I purged all of that because I didn't want all those games anyway. I was just trying some games and I was like, well, I just get rid of that. And we'll just re-download them because they're not terrible to download.
I want to weigh in a little bit on the installer for a second.
Okay. Yeah. Talk about the installer, your experience, since you just recently did it today.
Yes, I did it today, and I hate it. I hate every minute of it. If you have a single system with a single drive, and all you want to do is put Fedora on that drive, it's a click, you're done, blah, blah, blah. If you're on a system like mine that has 4 drives, 2 SD drives, 1 external USB, and 1 NVMe, and you want to properly partition, properly set up EFI, and blah, 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 it is a horrendous, awful, terrible nightmare. It is completely non-intuitive if you want to do anything other than just wipe your system and do the install. It is nowhere near the simplicity and elegance of the Debian variants, Ubuntu, whatever, any of the ones that do a similar install. Even just from a perspective of screen contrast, it was horrible because the installer started up in my default screen resolution of 4K at 100% scaling. So I could not see anything. Couldn't see any of the errors. Couldn't see what was wrong with, whatever I was doing. Every time I tried to install on a particular partition, it was telling me I didn't have an EFI partition and I had to manufacture one and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't helpful in any way. It wants to do everything in ButterFS, which is, if you don't know how ButterFS works, it can look weird. You can switch over to standard partition mode and stuff like that. There are ways to get around it, but I hated every minute of installing Fedora. So,
well, there's the contrast for you.
but anyway, back to your better experience.
Yeah, because I don't care about all that stuff. I want to do it like how most users, well, I guess, I don't know, a normal desktop user that has a system that they're just replacing the OS with. I think it just works fine out of the box. I think even Ubuntu struggles a bit when you get into the complexities of extreme customizations. I know even with the Garuda box running on Arch, when I switched home drives where my home directories were, it was a bit of it was much easier than I thought it was going to be with ButterFS, but it was still a bit laborious. But having done that same thing in a Windows box installation, it is really painful to do that in Windows after the fact, after you've installed things and you say, oh, I want to move all the user profiles to drive D and generate the home directories there. So I don't consider that too bad, but if you have a really extreme use case where you have multiple drives and you're doing some weird mounting and even perhaps what is the software RAID thing that they use? Did you see that? Was it LVM or something like that?
The LVM, yeah, that's an option. I avoided that like the plague. It was hard enough to deal with just the regular stuff without having to deal with like logical volumes. So yeah, I didn't.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so confused now with LLMs in our language. It's like I couldn't quite bring LVM out in my mind anymore because I've always tried to avoid LVMs just because that just adds a layer of complexity, I think, to a system that I've never introduced to at least a desktop system. Desktops are just desktops. I just use them to surf the internet and work software and everything else. So yeah, once you can get past the install and you boot, I had a few little things because being in an AMD system, we do have that issue. At least I have it. I don't know if you have it, where you get that spurious PCI Express error that you need to wipe out. Otherwise, it just kind of bloats and fills your log files and stuff like that. So in my configuration, I had to do the PCI Express APCI off or whatever it is. Let me cat that real quick.
I think it's PCIe_ACPI equals off.
Yeah.
I didn't get as far as being able to even look at my logs because I had that issue we'll talk about. And I have the same or a very similar Victus 15L to your system with the AMD Radeon and everything in it. So I suspect it was afflicted, but I did not get far enough to figure that out.
Okay, yeah. Once you put in that configuration change, that goes away quite rapidly. And I haven't noticed any deterrent effects. I have seen on some systems where possibly like the power monitoring on the monitor doesn't actually shut the monitor down or something like that. But with Fedora 40, everything seems to work just fine. That just sort of suppresses the error that I was seeing in the PCI Express, which has to do with I think power management or whatever, sleep. It's a power management issue that should be resolved within the kernel, I think, at this point. These systems are not new that I'm on and you're on and stuff like that. And the fact that we still have to circumvent things by adding express operators to the kernel boot parameters. So I think it sort of nudges things out there into a realm of not technically user-friendly. But it didn't impact the system. Like, it would run fine with all those error messages kind of just barfing into the log every so many seconds. Unless you happen to go through some custom configuration and made your var partition on a separate partition that is too tiny for handling very large logs that don't get swapped or reduced or anything else. So I wouldn't recommend that. But some people still do that and set up their var directly to its own partition, which I would not recommend for a desktop system.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted me to comment on that. I was, I didn't really have anything to add because your experience basically is mirroring mine for the most part.
Okay, yeah. I just didn't know if you had...
Except I'm way too picky.
I didn't know if you had like a different opinion about that. So no, like at one point we used to set up separate partitions for boot and var, and boot technically is a different partition because there's still a limitation on which file systems boot can actually exist in. But normally that's handled pretty magically unless it doesn't handle too many kernels and you've downloaded a bunch of custom kernels and filled your boot partition.
I'm pretty deliberate about removing old kernels and things like that. So when it comes to a desktop system, I usually just throw everything into a single partition. It's only really in server environments that I worry about splitting out things like temp and var just so you can have some of the different file system options attached to those. But for a desktop install, just throw everything in / call it good.
That's what I like to hear. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we got lightning now too. Great. Pop in the microphone. Anyway, once you get to the boot and you get past any kind of system-specific issues, I was surprised. I did the RPM Fusion, which I normally do to all Fedora systems. I get the RPM Fusion free and the non-free repos added, just to kind of add like a little bit of extra packaging and whatnot. And generally the list is pretty well curated and controlled, so I've had a lot of success over the many years of using Fedora with the RPM Fusion. It's sort of my go-to first thing that I do on every Fedora system. So that was added. And then I started kind of looking around the software center just to kind of see if I was going to install stuff out of the software center. And I was surprised at not really being able to find a lot of stuff sort of built in. I was looking for JTDX and that wasn't there. I was looking for QLog, that wasn't there. Kind of sort of the things that I'm using right now. If I want to install like CQR log, that's there. And WSJTX, that's there. Trusted QSL, even though Logbook of the World is, dead, that's there. The general stuff, like, it depends on what you're actually going out and looking for software applications. So I kind of found myself in two different camps. And I know if any of you that listen to the podcast watch our chats on the Discord server, you'll see that Russ sort of had to wash his hands from touching so many flat packs. That is sort of an artifact now that we start seeing in these systems, is that if you install software from the software center, in Fedora's case, a lot of stuff is going to be pointed to a flat pack. And in Ubuntu's case, a lot of stuff is pointed to a snap. And I don't think this is going away. So I do have, I just looked at my system. Currently, which I haven't fully installed everything yet, I have 18 flat packs already installed on the system. So I was planning to fully embrace the paradigm when I did this install. There was a button to click through in the initial sequence after reboot about enabling third-party repos, so I did that. And basically what I did was I just did a DNF install on whatever I wanted to install, and if it didn't exist, then I did the same thing as a flat pack. I was just going to just sort of ride the wave, install the flat packs if they existed or whatever, and just see how the system ran, whether stuff was installed like from a package repo or from a flat pack. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to benchmark it because I had other problems, but I had fully intended to just kind of not worry about my preconceptions about things like app images or flat packs or snaps, and just kind of do what the system was pointing me towards. I mean, it wasn't terrible. Like Qlog, I installed Qlog from Flatpak. It seemed to work fine. I installed a couple of other things from Flatpak. I also can't remember what they were, but their performance didn't seem terrible. I just had to kind of get over the kind of from doing it. But the crying game, right?
Yeah. Trying to
so
not
dirty.
But yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So if you can get past the flat pack thing, which I did go through and find some stuff. I did find myself always kind of creeping back to the command line to do installations. And in fact, I think, let me just go into my downloads directory. Let me see how many RPMs have I downloaded directly. So I have downloaded 3 RPMs. Actually, we'll count it as 2 because of the RPM Fusion one. I misclicked and downloaded that. So I did install Google Chrome via RPM directly from the Chrome site. I always get kind of leery downloading my browser from a flat pack just because I don't always know like who actually is managing that.
I downloaded Google from a flat pack, and it was it actually said it was the development version because like even in the icon it was like the Google icon with dev in it. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I'm just running the stable branch, so I have the stable current from Google, but like the RPM actually installs its repo when you install it, so it will update via a DNF update. And as well as I downloaded the JTDX improved version RPM from SourceForge because that was not available. And I don't think that's available via Flatpak. At least I didn't find it. Did you find that one?
No, I did not find that one. I did not find Grid Tracker either.
Yeah, well, you know me and Grid Tracker, so not quite in my stack.
Yeah.
By default. I know why you rely on it so much. I just, I don't need it for those same purposes. So like for the most part, everything has been pretty easy to install and everything else. I will kind of mention some just non-amateur radio stuff. I did install Steam via what was ever available in the software center. That has worked fine. I enabled, cross-play like you need to ensure that you can load, Proton and all that other stuff. And I have played several games already, no flaws whatsoever, including Windows-only games inside of Steam. So that has worked flawlessly. I also installed the Heroic game launcher, which allows me to play most of my Epic games, and I have a ton of those that I don't play, but there's a ton in the library. Of course, all but the ever popular Fortnite, which you definitely need to run a system that can auth with the EAC and stuff like that, the easy anti-cheat that never works in a Linux system. But I hear it's getting work done, or like some people have had some minimal success with it. I tend to try it like once a year, so it's not like I care that much. I have a Windows machine specifically to play Fortnite when I have the inkling to do so, which I'm on about a 2 or 3 month hiatus right now. That worked great. No problems with any of that stuff. Getting them authenticated, getting them connected, getting the games running. Flawless. I mean, it's just what I expect now, having run these in just about every other distribution. So, but like the graphics, works fine. Obviously I believe I'm running X. I'm not running Wayland, right? So you would have eventually got rid of it anyway because Barrier wouldn't work.
don't have to use barrier on that machine, so I'm not too worried about it. I could run Wayland, but if there were issues, then I probably would have canned it anyway.
Yeah. So, I think that'll eventually fix itself. I mean, it's just a matter of time and penetration in the market and stuff like that. I mean, almost every distribution now was defaulting to Wayland, so I've never had any problems with Wayland in my particular setup. It just happens to be that Budgie does not install in Wayland by default, so, and I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I don't really follow Budgie that closely. I just used it because it looks clean. I did install my usual set of screen stuff, like so my theme is running the Sweet Dark theme that I'm used to in Garuda Linux. So all of my stuff looks the same as it looked even when I ran Manjaro and GNOME. I run the Candy icons, so I downloaded all those. The only thing I noticed that's weird is, and it's probably just me because I'm still using HexChat. For some reason, HexChat does not come up in dark mode, which is just weird because it has come up in dark mode in every other machine that I've run. In this one, it does not. And HexChat, for those of you that are not super familiar with it, is an IRC client. And it is definitely a GTK2 app, so it is older. It almost looks like it was written in TK these days because GTK2 is TK-ish. If you want to get back into the tickle tick days and stuff like that of UIs, basic UI rendering and whatnot. But that's probably just me using a very old client that I've used for years and years and years. I basically went to HexChat when XChat kind of went away. So it's been my IRC client since the XChat days, which XChat was basically what this product came from. But other than that,
wow,
it works.
Fancy using HexChat. I still use Arisi.
Yeah. I never got into using a terminal-based IRC client, probably because I hate Emacs. I just don't use Emacs. I don't really hate it. I guess if I use it, I'd probably hate it, but But anyway, I don't need to get into that conversation. But yeah. So it's that's the only super odd thing about it all. I mean, I got the Prism Launcher on here. I'm running latest version. Obviously we just switched to on the Minecraft server to 1.21. So that's running fine. I got Vault Hunters running on here at a local copy. So yeah, I've had zero issues actually getting stuff running. I have to say, performance-wise, I have to say the UI is super duper snappy. I'm running it in 1440p. In fact, if you want to see it, I did actually record a response video for somebody that asked us to show the installation of Not1mm and PyWinKeyer via PipX. Just as an example, of course, it's all kind of non-UI stuff, but you can see my UI and what the system looks like on that video in our YouTube channel. I haven't had any problems. I haven't done a lot of amateur radio stuff on here. Like I said, I did install JTDX on here. I've had it hooked up to the machine. I have my profile auto launching my rig control when it boots into my profile. So that's already automatically connecting. And I haven't really had anything bad to report with the use of the system. I mean, everything seems to run just fine, if not perfectly fine, fast. Really responsive UI. I'm really kind of digging back into having Budgie because Budgie was always fast. The last time I used it, which was when I was using Solus as my operating system. So I'm really happy with that. I don't see a lot of screen tearing or anything else like that. Taking a window and just shaking it all over your window and stuff like that in your desktop environment. Yeah, and the default apps that come with it are fine. There's a pretty short list of what they put in there. The typical LibreOffice, and they have their own Parole media player, and they install Rhythmbox for music, which I kind of like Rhythmbox. I've used that many times over the years as well. I've recorded a couple of videos. I have not posted any of them yet. I want to finish recording the main amateur radio one, doing the Q-log installation and the log recovery and all that stuff. So I'm kind of saving some time to do that on. So I have not technically installed Q-log on this system. I was kind of waiting to do that in a video to kind of record it and then put that out there to show sort of what I would set up for my system. It's always a smaller subset. Even if I even installed the LHS installation or whatever, which has all of the ham radio pure blend stuff. I mean, that stuff's all great, but I never use any of that stuff. So I only install the stuff that I want to use on a regular basis. And then the extra stuff that kind of sort of comes with the OS because you install the full package. I just deal with that because it's inadvertently I'm going to eventually need a spreadsheet app and a writer app and stuff like that. So I'm not terribly concerned about that stuff. I did install like Visual Studio Code. I have what else do I have? Android Studio on here because I was messing around with some Flutter development. I installed Rust on here to do some Rust development stuff just to kind of play with it and see how everything works in this particular system and what else I would need to get it running. I have not installed the .NET stuff yet, but I have had that on my Manjaro system. I did some Blazor development stuff directly in Linux, which is quite easy to do nowadays, which is really fun. But yeah, I have to say my overall experience is pretty positive with Fedora. I think it's a little bit more command line heavy in the fact that, if you want to kind of get away from installing stuff directly in from the software center and you want to go out and get your own RPMs and stuff like that, you are going to have to relegate a little bit of time back to the command line, which I think some people take as a negative. So I'm not sure if I'm 100% happy with that from the perspective of an everyday user. But for my purposes, it's fine because I'm kind of used to it by now. So I'm not sure I would recommend this over, let's say an Ubuntu or something like that sort of has more of the software that you'd be interested in the repo, and you'll spend more time being able to use those GUI tools like the Software Center and whatnot to install software. But yeah, like you said, DNF works quite well. Yeah, yeah. I haven't ever had any problems with using DNF versus apt.
No, and I like the fact that it's almost like a drop-in replacement for it. If you're on an RPM-based system and you use DNF, you can use it in almost exactly the same way as you used apt on a Debian-based system. So,
yeah, you can always set yourself up.
The way they, well, it's not quite that good, but the way they've sort of upgraded DNF lately, it also makes it kind of look like PAMac, honestly, with the way it kind of enumerates the packages that are going to be installed, your options that you want to pick, stuff like that. So if you've seen how PAMac works on an Arch box, DNF is kind of looks like that a little bit too. So it's all very friendly looking. I don't mind it at all when it comes to dealing with RPM stuff.
Yeah, and it's very clear at anything being installed new versus an update and things that are being installed due to a dependency based upon an update as well. And then transitive dependencies and stuff like that. I guess they call them weak dependencies as well. It'll show you even those kind of broke out. So this is also included because, you might have developer extensions turned on and then your kernel just wanted to update today, but you need the devel package as well. And it'll download that and also list out what's being removed and from where it's being removed from. So it's very verbose, like you say. It definitely gives you a lot of information. Most people don't ever look at it. They just hit yes, install. And it does default to no. So if you just sit there and run DNF upgrade and then you just press enter, it's just going to not do anything. So you need to definitely hit the Y button to ensure that this is what you really want to do. You can set up automatic upgrades so that it takes care of stuff scheduled, so you never have to run DNF upgrade. I actually do this on my server. I have it run updates every week and automatically reboot if it needs to reboot and stuff like that. So I don't really manage that anymore. So every time I log into the system, it's already updated, and that is running Fedora server. But I think it's a little older version. I don't think I've updated that to Fedora 40, but yeah, that stuff you can do, and you can kind of just take that completely out of your workflow. It'll take care of updating Flatpaks and everything else automatically as well. And it'll tell you where those Flatpaks came from, if they came from, FlatHub or some other source that you have added to your system. It'll take care of that. And like I say, I've always really liked Fedora. I've never really had any things that I hated about it. There was a very ugly transition time during the Pipewire days when they were going from Pulse Audio to Pipewire, and they hadn't quite had Wire Plumber or something like that, and a couple of the other things that have made life easier since those days. Because I did boot my system one day in Fedora and had absolutely no audio and could not fix it. It was not a happy day at the house, but those things have kind of gone away. They have a pretty resilient system with regards to that, except for in Russ's case, which he'll probably share his audio woes now.
Well, all I want to do about my audio woes is get somebody, if you have any in-depth knowledge of pulse audio, pipe wire, and integration potentially with the Yaesu FT710 radio, I need your help and I need you to get in contact with me because this problem is just ludicrous. One thing, I didn't look at the Fedora system, the Fedora 40 system, when I installed it to see what the audio subsystem was. I kind of assumed it was pulse audio, but it was most likely pipe wire. Any system I have run other than Bodhi Linux, which is Ubuntu with Enlightenment, I have not been able to get my FT710 to work. What's interesting is if I bring up like WSJTX and I configure it for my FT710 using rig control D, the rig control works perfectly well. And if I configure the audio devices to be the C media devices that are referenced by the USB connection in the FT710, then if I'm listening to the audio from an FT8, if I'm on like 21074, it decodes FT8 just fine. And then if I go to transmit, the transmit audio comes out the speakers, the default audio device, not what I have programmed in WSJTX. And if I try and change it, or if I alter the default audio device in this system to reference the FT710's audio device, then nothing works. Everything just goes crazy. So this is a problem that needs to be figured out as far as I'm concerned. I can't believe I'm the only person that's having this issue. I know there's more than one FT710 in the world, and there has to be somebody using an FT710 on Linux that isn't Bodhi Linux, and I would suspect that would be everybody except me. So if this is something that you are into, if you're into pulse audio, pipe wire, audio subsystems on Linux, and especially if you have access to an FT710, please get in touch with me. I've begged on this before and had no responses, but I'm desperate at this point. I would love to run something on my Shack computer other than Bodhi Linux. I'm really getting tired of it, and I really want to try something else. But this issue with the FT710 persists across everything I've tried, every desktop environment, every distro, whether it's RPM-based, Deb-based, Arch-based, whatever. I don't get it. I don't know how to fix it. It's driving me crazy, basically.
I can imagine.
So anyway, but other than that, as far as like how Fedora ran, apart from that, it was great. I loved every minute of it. The UI was clean. I was using GNOME, of course. Apps loaded fast, even though I was running off an external USB drive. And I enjoyed the experience. And if I could just get this one problem sorted out, I'd have probably just stuck with it.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, I don't have that problem at all with the IC7100, but also you probably don't have that problem either with the IC7100.
Yeah, I don't. If the FT710 is not connected and I'm just using the ICOM, it works fine. So
it's a Yaesu thing.
Well, it's a something thing, but yeah.
Yeah, it should be able to work better. I know. Yeah, there's some weirdness to some of the Yaesu things. I know we've talked in the past about my SCU17 that I have connected to my FT450D, and that's a strange little beast, but it does run. It doesn't quite have the issues that you've experienced because I believe it has like the same kind of sound card that you would find in a Signal Link. Provides the Burr Brown driver or whatever that is pretty consistent across most devices, including the IC7100. I think that even uses the Burr Brown driver set for it.
It does. Yep.
Yeah. So that's always been consistent. The C media thing is something that's, it's in its own realm and comes with a new set of issues. And hopefully we'll hear something back from a listener or possibly, the interwebs. I know we have lots of people here that like to search for stuff and figure stuff out. So maybe we'll find a solution to that problem so you can get away from using Bodhi all the time.
I would certainly appreciate that. I really would. Because some of the other desktop environments on different Linux distributions that I've tried, like using Garuda with Dragonized KDE, and even just now the Fedora 40 with GNOME. I mean, those desktops are just much cleaner, and I like them. And Enlightenment's okay. It's not my favorite thing, but right now it currently works. And I would just really like to be able to use something else. So I did notice that when I installed Fedora 40, the first update I did installed 660 packages. So you can definitely tell you're not using a rolling release, because that was, I don't know how old Fedora 40 is technically right now, but that seemed like a lot.
That's not very old. It's like maybe a month or two. So, but like that's pretty typical. I mean, when they mint the ISO, there's always updates. I mean, I just did an update right before the show, and there's yet another kernel and 35 new packages here. So, the thing with Fedora is they do keep things updated, and it's updated more frequently. So if you're used to being like an Ubuntu LTS user, you will notice substantial more package changes than what you're probably used to seeing. And this also is indicative of the pace of the releases of Fedora. That's why we get a new Fedora release more often than we see an LTS release from Ubuntu. So they tend to do sort of more major changes of architecture, like, going with Wayland as a default, and going with, the latest Plasma in the new version or something like that. They try to have these very specific reasons to push out the releases, and going to a new kernel rev, like we're in the 6.9 kernels now here in the Fedora 40 land. So yeah, they pretty much stay on top of it. The updates are pretty rapid. I do like it because it kind of reminds me of being in an Arch or a Manjaro, Manjaro kind of pseudo Arch, where you do get a lot of the package updates, and stuff feels like it's being updated at a greater pace, so you don't feel like you're being left behind with your packages.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, overall, except for the one, sort of severe issue, if I remove that from my discussion of Fedora 40, I would certainly rate it, give it an LHS readiness score in the sort of upper fours, like 4.6, something like that. I mean, I think it works really well, and I can't really discount it for whatever problem I'm having with the Yaesu FT710. That could be something esoteric that's, specific to that rig or whatever. But overall, I think Fedora 40 is really good. What little of it I was able to deal with before I had to kind of just go back to what I was using, I enjoyed quite a bit.
Yeah. The only annoying thing that I ran into, which was possibly specific to how Budgie handles notifications, it sort of every once in a while. So if I was running a full screen game, let's say Minecraft, and I was sort of away from it, and it was in AFK mode or whatever, and a notification would come up, every once in a while it would pop the window and make it go minimized out of full screen, which I thought was kind of odd. But I also just attribute that to Budgie, the way it handles notifications. So I have since muted notifications, which I don't like anyway. I normally do that on every system, and I just didn't do it on the Budgie. But I did notice that as a kind of a weird artifact, because I wouldn't think that a notification pop-up should change the state of a full screen application. So that's the only weird thing. I think if there were anything to report bad about it, specifically to the Budgie installation of Fedora 40, that's the one bad thing that I have ran into. But it's just, again, me not muting the things that I would normally mute anyway. So like a Discord thing would pop up, and then be like, oh, I don't really care about seeing that in the game, So yeah, that's all been disabled, and I haven't seen any other weirdness issues since then. But overall, yeah, I would say Fedora 40 in general for general use, it would definitely be in the fours. 4.6, yeah, maybe not that high, because you do have to do a little bit of trading off back and forth between possibly downloading some RPMs if you're using software that's not handled via RPM Fusion or Flatpak. For that case, you might have to go fish a little bit and go find your applications. That's not any different in Debian land either, because like I had to do that for JTDX and a couple other things. Obviously, with us just building that LHS distro, we've already went through and had to go out and download stuff and build stuff with our build script and stuff like that to get certain applications to install on there. And I really haven't gotten into that depth of having to install stuff that's out of the ordinary on the system yet, like a SDR trunk, which I probably wouldn't install on my system. Like I haven't even looked at doing that possibly on the system. But I have installed SDR software, and I've already used my SDR, brand new, whatever the version 4 is. And that has worked fine. No problems whatsoever. Got my little loop up here in the garage and been listening to FM radio and stuff like that with the application. So that's worked fine too. So I would probably definitely solid 4.4 at least, if not better, if you're comfortable with the CLI portion of using the system. You'll definitely have to delve into that at some point. I'm thinking you're not going to get that monster meta package from Debian to install all the ham radio software pretty rapidly with this particular system. But I kind of knew that going in.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to take off the 2 extra points because of having to install a bunch of stuff from Flatpak. And then I will say that if you have to deal with the partitioner at all, then it goes down to a 1. So,
well, yeah, no, I can understand. If it's a non-starter, it becomes a 1. That's basically it. It gets a 1 point because it's Linux.
Right, exactly.
But I think for most use cases, you're not going to really have that specific issue in your problem house. That's for sure.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think that's a good enough treatise on Fedora 40 for tonight. So, I mean, I definitely, if you don't have like an esoteric use case and you want to try it out in your shack, I would absolutely give it a go. Pick your desktop environment of choice and run with it. I definitely think it'll work fine for you. You might find yourself delving into Flatpak land a little more than you might, like. But other than that, it'll probably work out well for you.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get on to feedback.
All right. This first one, you can weigh in on this first one a little bit if you want to, because you've dealt with a club a little bit with the K2BSA. That's an amateur radio club, and it has members and all that good stuff. Back, what is it now? 2 years ago now, probably,
maybe more.
We started up the open source amateur radio club, which now has a call sign. It's Alpha Foxtrot 0 Sierra Sierra. And it's also, there's a website that they've got to fix and stuff like that. But basically what I wanted it to be was kind of a club that all listeners of Linux in the Ham Shack could be a part of. And of course everybody else as well. But I was kind of hoping that all listeners of Linux in the Ham Shack would be a part of it. And I think the structure was basically just to say, here's our membership roster, and all you have to do to be a member is just say, hey, I want to be a member. There's no dues, anything like that. Is there something about that I need to think about, or is that a legitimate way to establish a membership other than the trustees and board members we already have?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we have like the organization bylaws and whatever for the actual amateur radio club. And then, as long as membership is based upon those kind of rules within the bylaws, then, yeah, that would be fine. And I would suggest probably allowing people to set up like a membership to like the mailing list or something like that. And like that, let that be their membership. So if they unsubscribe, they're no longer a member. If they're subscribed, they're a member. Just so you have some kind of way to do announcements and feedback and interaction and stuff like that, since the website is, basically, just static content.
All right. Well, that seems fair enough. We'll establish that on groups.io, I guess, and we'll put that out there and establish membership. I do have a constitution and bylaws and all that kind of good stuff. I will publish that on the website. So
awesome.
And the whole point of that is because I want to start doing nets. I'd like to do 2 nets, one VHF and digital, and the other HF. I've been working on my repeater. I finally got the repeater up. It's coordinated. It's listed on Repeater Book. It's actually sort of out there in the wild, and you can use it. So if you're in Southwest Missouri, it's on the air. But I've been working on doing a bunch of linking, too, in a crazy conglomeration of bridges that I don't even want to go into because it, is enough to melt the brain. That repeater can be accessed via the Air, System Fusion, WiresX, DMR, M17, D-Star, and All-Star Link. All of those are linked together.
The super repeater.
So when we do the VHF/digital net, anybody will be able to get on that net via any of those modes. Now, currently, D-Star doesn't work because I have to buy the decoder hardware. So that is sort of coming. But any of the other modes, whether you're C4FM, DMR, All-Star, M17, FM over the air, whatever, or connecting through the WiresX room, anybody can get in through any of those means. All of that stuff's going to be posted on the website where it's clear on how to make the connection to all that stuff. So, and Echolink. I forgot Echolink. You can get in via that too. So I do want to establish some nets. We'll get that all up. I'll create some preambles and stuff, try and establish some net controls, some times, stuff like that. And then, of course, we'll do an HF net. Not sure where and when, but we'll establish all that. So obviously, anybody will be able to participate in any of these nets, whether you're a member of the AF0SS or not. But just wanted to put that out there. Kind of been putting it out there, but I've been waiting to get these sort of interlinks all dealt with. And now that that's sort of happy, we can kind of move forward. With that, do you want to handle these two here from Tom, since they're just kind of random stuff on Facebook?
Yeah, sure. We have a comment on episode number 545 from Tom, and for it says, "Hope
you cut out. You didn't.
Oh, I didn't do it right.
Well, you cut out. We didn't hear the. Hi!
Oh, there you go. Well, you got it, so that'll work. Hoping y'all talk about Field Day. It's coming up quick. I'm putting my station together. PS K3 cheapo laptop. We're having a dry run this week at the park to make sure networking, etc., all work using N3 FJP again this year. Good stuff, and it's all simple Windows, etc., for the newbies. So we've just talked about Field Day. Obviously, it just occurred this weekend that we're recording this particular podcast, but we didn't really go into a lot of depth into Field Day because, well, we've been gone for the past couple of weeks, so we didn't record anything new. But we talked about Field Day for sure at Ham Benching with quite a few folks. And obviously on Discord a lot. So definitely join our Discord community, and that's where you can definitely interface with us in a more async and maybe more real-time nature for sure. The second comment is also on the same episode from Tom, and he says, "Looking forward to listening to the show tonight. Guessing y'all are doing it tonight. Unrelated. Check out my new rig config in the Jeep. I couldn't mount them low because of the 6-speed. I can appreciate that. And 73 N4." Hey, or something like that. I think my mic kicks out every time I do that. So
yeah, I think it's like clipping on you. So.
The limiter catches it and says, "No, you are not doing that into the microphone." So, because I see all my bars are good or nothing. So, sorry, Tom, I can't do it, but Russ can do it for you every time.
I can do it, yeah. Except sometimes I don't want to because I want him to expect it. Like I'm going to do the N4 and then I don't do it.
That's right.
Obviously we did not talk about Field Day, but I did take a look at the picture. Excellent setup. I always worry about people who have a bunch of screens up in their windshield because you should be focusing on the road, not on your rig. But, it is what it is. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Tom, for the feedback. And let's move on to a comment on your Not 1mm installation video, which you mentioned just a little bit ago, from EORAM360, who asked, "Did you test install on Debian?" And the answer for me is yes. It's really easy to install on pretty much anything that uses Python because all you have to do is install pipex and then do a pipex install not 1mm, and it just kind of works. I assume that's your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I suggested as the installation routine for not 1mm and Pi1 serial is to use pipex because it does simplify the installation and the upgrade of the software as the upgrades are, they're frequent enough that you want to kind of test it, test upgrade before running a contest and stuff like that.
Very good. So thanks for the feedback, EORAM360. And yeah, just recall or try there on most any system. If you have pipex installed, it's just a pipex install not 1mm and it's ready to go. You should probably handle this one. Comment on building your Ubuntu Ham Shack computer part 4, which is like a 2-year-old video at this point, but you're still getting comments.
It's a very old video now.
From Andre XU3PQ, hi. Video tip for the use of .com 7610, which I don't think either of us have. Well, I don't think you do too. Yes, sound recontrols don't work. It doesn't know how to select the USB ports.
Yeah, that's not a lot of information to go on. Obviously, it should work just fine. You do have multiple USB ports that will show up from connecting to your rig, with my experience with the IC7100. And I think Russ had mentioned that both ports sort of allow you to do the connection, so as long as you know which ones are connecting to it, you should be able to get rig control connected to it. I do use the by ID path to connect my rig control D2. I don't know if that negatively impacts or positively impacts your particular installation, but I'm assuming it should be very similar to an IC7100 when it connects, at least for the minimal read control stuff that you would expect to occur via read control D. I would like to probably hear what other issue you're having, maybe more specific with some error messages or something like that, and we could probably give you some additional feedback on it. Obviously, the Ubuntu Hamshack computer was based on, God, I'm thinking like it was like 20, it's an old version. It's not young, but it happens to be, I mean, that series. I was looking at our analytics in our YouTube channel, and I think like the one of the videos is like 78,000 views on it. There's 7,800 views. Sorry, not 70,000. Still, I thought it was a lot. 7,800 views for an Ubuntu installation video. That's probably 4 or 5 years old at this point. Maybe I'll refresh that a little bit. I don't think it'll help with your 7610 specific issue, but I think we need a little bit more information to understand what specifically you're seeing. Because I mean, you could have something as simple as like a permission issue. If you haven't gone through and done the dial-up group for your user yet, you won't be able to access any of the ports. So that is always like a big stumbling feature when you do go into Linux, having that permission to access serial ports, even USB generated serial ports. You have to have that access. And like in some instances, you need a dial-up permission. Some you need, there's other groups based upon specific Linux installations. But I believe for Ubuntu and Fedora, it's dial-out. So you need that old school, PTY connections available to you for connecting to it with software.
I think on Arch systems it's UUCP.
Yeah, UUCP. I was gonna say Arch is different, but I couldn't remember what it was offhand.
Yeah, it's one of the two for sure. It's either going to be dial-out or UUCP. The only permissions for it to have access to your USB ports. So, all right. Well, with that, we had an email from Tim KD0UUU or Ooh. On episode number 545 of Linux in the Ham Shack, he says, "Just wanted to say I discovered your podcast this year and I am hooked. Love it." This is the kind of feedback we need, folks. My thoughts on fish: color should never be off. Salmon should have olive green back and top of head. Flesh should be salmon orange. We're talking about sushi, by the way, guys. Tan or brownish is run the other way fast. And if it smells like carp, kill in the spring runoff. Run. I'm pretty sure I have a card from NE4RD also. Thanks kindly, Tim KD0. You. So
awesome. Yeah, thanks for the email, Tim. That's really great. We're glad you're enjoying the podcast, and we hope to continue for many years.
Absolutely, as time permits, as it seems to be getting a little more difficult these days. But we're definitely going to try and keep things a little more regular. I definitely do apologize for some of the breaks and lapses in content, but unfortunately, it's not really avoidable in some cases. So as a counterpoint to Tim, we recently got some feedback from David. Now, I did some digging around to try and figure out if we can figure out who David is, but I did not get very far. We're going to read this as it's written here, and then I went back the other day, and with Cheryl, we re-listened to episode number 518 of Linux in the Ham Shack, which is Weekender number 108. He says 118, but it was actually 108. So I guess we'll just read this and then we'll address it. When I studied, quote, argumentation and debate, rule 1 was, if you can't back it up, don't say it. The consensus of your topic, worst thing about ham radio, was old white guys. Now, again, I went back and listened to this episode, and I don't believe that was the consensus at all. Here's a challenge for you. Pick the computer language of your choice and set up the print string. We should promote the inclusion of all groups in amateur radio except age, race, sex. The one thing I hate is to go to a ham event and to see too many of those people there. Now make lists for age, race, and sex, pulling variables from any government form, cycle through the string to create all possible strings from that string and those variables. Now, read all of those strings on your show. Well, all of those strings except the old white guys one. Now, I am going to include myself in the old white guys category, so as you have already done that. Would you feel comfortable slighting any one of those other strings publicly? No, but as a group, old white guys is fair game. In this context, I absolutely think it is fair game, and we'll punt that around here in a second. Okay, so back that up. Yes, most hams fall into that group. Well, there's your answer. So if any other group, age, race, or sex that ever becomes more successful than its census percentage would suggest should then become fair game for exclusion and derision. We never once in episode 518 of Linux in the Ham Shack talked about excluding anyone. Go back and listen to it. We never suggested exclusion. All we ever suggested was inclusion. So anyway, I'm answering the question before we get to the end. So hold on. At least the next time I asked to accept the commitment of being a board member of a club or volunteer for any job involving amateur radio, I should just reply, no, let the age, race, sex do it. Okay. So I've already had most of the say I wanted to have about this feedback. But again, I did go back and listen to episode number 518. Cheryl did as well. We tried to, listen to it with unbiased perception of what we said on that episode. I couldn't find anywhere where we suggested bigotry against old white guys. Because honestly, if we did that, I would have to include myself in that demographic. The problem is not with the fact that the hobby is consistently made up of mostly old white men. I mean, we recognize, and I think David also recognizes, that is a fact. What we would just like to see is more inclusivity. That's all. We're not saying there can't still be 90% of old white guys in the hobby, because that would be silly. It's obviously going to be that way, if not now and if not into the near future, potentially forever. But we felt like, and I think we articulated pretty well, that it would be nice to see some additional diversity. That's all. And I would challenge anyone to go back and listen to that episode and tell me that that is not what we said, and that you have a different opinion of it. So what do you think?
Oh, I agree with your consensus there. I mean, I think when we were referencing that, and I did not listen to the episode again, but I would say that it was primarily the optics of the hobby. I talked about personal experiences, going to club meetings and stuff like that. And in fact, I was... Funny enough, I just went to a club meeting last week to drop off a name tag that I picked up at Hamvention for a guy. And I was watching, everybody in the room and then the people up on Zoom, because it's a hybrid meeting. So they have half on Zoom and half on the meeting. And I just turned 50. So I was the youngest person in the room. And, I definitely pass as white. I mean, I'm 50% Cuban, but, I definitely look like an old white guy, I guess, now. But and I'm definitely old. Yeah, I'm 50. So I was just it's stark. I mean, fortunately, the club that I went to does have old white females as well. So there is a nice diversity change there, seeing more and more females being present. My concern is probably more to the line of that. Yeah, we need to focus on getting younger people, more, representative of the population that are in our towns, involved in our clubs and involved in the hobby and stuff like that. And, I see that everywhere. I'm involved in multiple nonprofit organizations where, we provide safe spaces for all parties and all, sexes, races, genders, everything, that's literally what we focus on. We used to joke every person is our people. We bring in everyone. People that have slurs put against them. Those are our people. Those are our people. We want those people in the theater. We want those people in clubs. We want people that represent everything that is amazing about living in the society that we live in. Represented in the hobby. That's I think all I was kind of pinpointing with my observations of what it is. A field day, not field day, but Hamvention is a great representation of kind of the hobby. I think there is a good diversity of people attending Hamvention. That is, very welcoming to me. Every time I go to Hamvention, I'm seeing so many faces, so many nationalities, so many ethnicities, so many sexes, age ranges, and everything else. I mean, it's amazing to go there and see people bringing their kids and bringing their wives and stuff like that. And, maybe the wife is bringing the husbands, that is very much the case too now, which is really amazing. I know a lot of female ham operators that their husbands are not involved in the hobby at all. So, I just like to see more and more of it represented in like my community and the places I go and I see and stuff like that. And, my many years of being a ham radio operator, which is, now in the 30-year range. I know it's a tough topic. And, we did kind of curtail it into our dynamic discussion on a random topic wheel where we talked about the things we hate about ham radio. And we don't hate anything about ham radio really. But we had to come up with something. And I think the optics of ham radio is not great in general. And it could be better. If I went to my club and I saw everyone I saw at Hamvention at the club, I would be awesome. I'd be like, oh, this is great. This is amazing. I just don't see that representation in the sectors in which I have purview of.
Yeah, I was thinking about when you were talking about Hamvention, I was thinking about Hamvention myself. I was thinking back to the fact that we've been going to Hamvention for more than 10 years now, and every year it's more or less the same as far as the audience, as far as the participation numbers. I would guess, and of course this is purely anecdotal, but I would guess that more than 70% of the people who attend are white males. But that being said, I never once in the 3 days of Hamvention this year or any other year that I've been there thought while it was happening, wow, there's a lot of white guys here. And anytime there was a female operator or kids or foreign operators, different countries, Latin American countries, Asian countries, whatever, I never once thought consciously about the demographic. I thought of all of them as ham radio operators. And I was just, for me, I was just putting it out there on the episode that I would hope that we get to a point where that's all we see. We understand where the hobby came from. We understand where the demographic lies. And just in the spirit of general inclusivity, I would like to hope that at some point, any of those parameters like age, sex, race, whatever, never sort of enter into the picture. It's just, you're a ham radio operator, you're interested in the hobby, and we never have to worry about the fact that, it sort of started as a group of, let's call it what it is, privileged white males. And I just wanted to promote inclusivity. I hope we see more of it. I hope lots more people get interested in the hobby, regardless of where you come from or what your interests are. And, that's where I was coming from. But the only reason we called it something we quote unquote hate about the hobby is because, stereotypes have some basis in fact. And the general population of the ham radio hobby is aging. And we would just like to see more people participate from whatever walk of life you happen to be part of. And that's all I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, I think that's good enough.
All right. Well, that being said, I guess I'm going to let you run down through the subscribers and such.
I sure will. So these are our new subscribers, new supporters, and live participants for this evening's podcast. And tonight we have a new subscriber Patreon here. We have John, KC5NGX. Thank you very much, John, for joining us and helping support the podcast. On Facebook, we have Scott Shellhart, Brian Holub, Hamdi Abu El Anin. Sorry about if I mispronounced that. Mark Cohen, Herman Spragues, David Sandness, Andy Reinhardt, John Strunk, Ram, Repeaters and Technical, and 24 others. ... Yay, Facebook. Over on X, we have @JGatsby15. Thank you for joining us there. I've recently started getting back into looking at Twitter, and I'm just as disgusted with it as ever. So I probably won't participate very much there. But anyway, on YouTube, we have Robert Bronowski, Thomas Farmer, and Brad McDowell. Over on Discord, we have David, KE0AZ, Chris, M0XRS, N30ZI, SM0KBI, Prepper on a Hill, Q in Diaz, KD0YTE, Maddie, and Miss Anthropic. Over on Instagram, we have
Genevieve Winters.
Genevieve Winters. Hey, there it is. I was going to put it together. I was trying to find the break in the words. Genevieve. Thank you, Genevieve, for joining us on Instagram. On Mastodon, we have KF6FLJ, No merchandise sales, no mailing list joins. And on the live chat tonight, we have Tony, K4XSS, Jill, K1TTZ, Steve, KJ5T, Niemanden, and Ted, WA0EIR.
All right, and real quick, I'm going to correct one of your Discord mentions. It's actually SM0KBW, not KBI. I think you were just caught up in the last one.
Oh, probably. Sorry about that.
And I also forgot to put in the new folks who joined on Discord, which is RFB, John, WE1DER. Man, it's contagious. Stitched, Durky, and Wolfgang DM5WK. I forgot to add those to our Discord list, but thanks to everybody who joined, who follows us on social media, downloads the episode, or checks us out on YouTube or whatever, and especially to those who support us financially through Patreon or through PayPal. We really appreciate that. It does help keep the lights on. And real quick, before we get on out of here, I forgot to mention that Linux in the Ham Shack, at least Cheryl and I, will be at Huntsville. We'll be at the Huntsville Ham Fest in August. So we will have a booth there. So if you're in that part of the world or happen to be going there, come look for us. We really appreciate it. And we will have a representation for the Open Source Amateur Radio Club there as well. We hope to see you there, and in the meantime, we hope you have a great week, and we'll tune in for the next episode, which will be a short topics episode, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get on out of here and wrap up episode number 546 of Linux in the Ham Shack, and for the On Assignment Cheryl, W5MOO, I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Live recordings are Sunday nights at 8 o'clock Central Time. Our homepage can be found at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast via Patreon at patreon.com/LHS podcast. We're also on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Mastodon. Contact us via email at info@lhspodcast.info or via voicemail at 190954776469. That's 1909 LHS show. We also have merch. So until next we meet, remember to always heed your hedonism.